Hello to the third grade. This is chapter 2 of Pollyanna by Eleanor H. Porter. We've learned about two characters and we'll see if there's any new characters and if we actually get to meet Pollyanna yet. So chapter 2, it's called Old Tom and Nancy. In the little attic room, Nancy swept and scrubbed vigorously, paying particular attention to the corners. There were times, indeed, when the vigor she put into her work was more of a relief to her feelings than it was an ardor to efface dirt. Nancy, in spite of her frightened submission to her mistress, was no saint. I just wish I could dig out the corners of her soul, she muttered jerkily, punctuating her words with murderous jabs of her pointed cleaning stick. There's plenty of needs cleaning, all right. All right, the idea of sticking that blessed child way off up here in this hot little room with no fire in the winter, too, and all this big house to pick and choose from. Unnecessary children, indeed. Humph! Snapped Nancy, wringing her rag so hard her fingers ached from the strain. I guess it ain't children what is most unnecessary. Just now. For some time she worked in silence, then her task finished. She looked about the bare little room in plain disgust. Well, it's done. My part, anyhow, she sighed. Ain't no dirt here. And there's mighty little else, poor little soul. A pretty place this is to put a homesick, lonesome child into. She finished, going out and closing the door with a bang. Oh, she ejaculated, biting her lip. Then, doggedly, well, I don't care. I hope she did hear that bang. I hope she did hear the bang. I do. In the garden that afternoon, Nancy found a few minutes in which to interview old Tom, who had pulled the weeds and shoveled the paths about the place for uncounted years. Mr. Tom, began Nancy, throwing a quick glance over her shoulder to make sure she was unobserved, did you know a little girl was coming here to live with Miss Polly? What? demanded the old man, straightening his bent back with difficulty. A little girl to live with Miss Polly. Go on with your joking, scoffed unbelieving Tom. Why don't ye tell me the sun is a-goin' to set in the east tomorrow? But it's true. She told me so herself, maintained Nancy. It's her niece, and she's 11 years old. The man's jaw fell. Sure. I wonder why, he muttered. Then a tender light came into his faded eyes. It ain't, but it must be. Miss Jenny's little gal. There wasn't none of the rest of 'em married. Why, Nancy, it must be Miss Jenny's little gal. Glory be to praise, to think of my old eyes a-seeing this. Who was Miss Jenny? She was an angel straight out of heaven, breathed the man fervently. But the old master and missus knew her as their oldest daughter. She was 20 when she married and went away from here long years ago. Her babies all died, I heard, except the last one, and that must be the one what's a-comin'. She's 11 years old. Yes, she might be, nodded the old man. And she's going to sleep in the attic. More shame to her, scolded Nancy with another glance over her shoulder towards the house behind her. Old Tom frowned. The next moment a curious smile curved his lips. I'm a-wondering what Miss Polly will do with a child in the house, he said. Well, I'm a-wondering what a child will do with Miss Polly in the house, snapped Nancy. The old man laughed. I'm afraid you ain't fond of Miss Polly, he grinned, as if ever anybody could be fond of her, scorned Nancy. Old Tom smiled oddly. He stooped and began to work again. I guess, maybe. You didn't know about Miss Polly's love affair, he said slowly. Love affair? Her? No. And I guess nobody else didn't either. Oh, yes, they did, nodded the old man. And the fella's living today, right in this town, too. Who is he? I ain't a-tellin' that. It ain't fit that I should. The old man drew himself erect. In his dim blue eyes, as he faced the house, there was the loyal servant's honest pride in the family he had served and loved for long years. But it don't seem possible. But it don't seem possible. Her and a lover, still maintained Nancy. Old Tom shook his head. You didn't know Miss Polly as I did, he argued. She used to be real handsome, and she would be now if she'd let herself be. Handsome? Miss Polly? Yes, if she just let that tight hair hern all out loose and careless like, as it used to be, and wear the sort of bonnets with posies in 'em, and the kind of dresses all lace and white things, you'd see she'd be handsome. Miss Polly ain't old, Nancy. Ain't she, though? Well, then, she's got an awfully good imitation of it. She has. She has, sniffed Nancy. Yes, I know. It begun then, at the time of the trouble with her lover, nodded old Tom. And it seems as if she'd been feeding on wormwood and thistles ever since. She's that bitter and prickly to deal with. I should say she was, declared Nancy indignantly. There's no pleasing her. Nohow, no matter how you try. I wouldn't stay if it weren't for the wages and the folks at home what's needin' 'em. But some day, I shall just bile over. And when I do, I guess it'll be goodbye Nancy for me. It will. Old Tom shook his head. I know, I've felt it. It's natural. But 'tain't best, child, 'tain't best. Take my word for it, 'tain't best. And again he bent his old head to the work before him. Nancy, called a sharp voice. Yes, ma'am, stammered Nancy and hurried towards the house. And that's the end of chapter 2. Old Tom revealed a little something about Polly, which might make her a little bit prickly. I wonder what she was like, and I wonder, so there must have been a time when she wasn't quite so prickly. And old Tom seems like over time he's come to really respect the home that he lives in and the family, and he isn't quite so judgmental as Nancy appears to be. I wonder if she'll be less judgmental over time as well, if she continues to live in the house and doesn't explode at Miss Polly. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 2. Thank you.